Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this session we have with Mr. Eri Adeyinka, the founder of Teach, the Eri Adeyinka Co-Creation Hub. And like I said earlier, we started a discussion at the Edify Summit we had at the University of Ibadan, and we began a conversation, a conversation that even the participants on the group page were looking forward to having it, having sending their feedbacks. Said they were really inspired by what was shared, and we look forward to hearing more from it. So we have Mr. Harry Oluwadeyinka with us this evening to expound and to give us you know build add more flesh to all that he said the other day. And when we had a discussion prior to now, we were able to communicate and still see in the line at which this discussion or the direction at which this discussion would go. And so I'm sure that even myself, I'm ready to listen and get to hear what he has to share for us today. I'm sure it's going to be a really insightful session. So, Mr. Erioluwa, you have the floor. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Carry on.
Thank you thank you so much. Good evening, Victor and the entire team at Edify Summit. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. It was amazing sharing some of my thoughts regarding innovation and during the summit. I'm just really glad that we now have enough time to do a deep dive into some of the things that we had raised and some of the concerns and some of the trends that we have seen in education and also regarding pre-service teachers, in education, and how we can get them into that spot where they can get into innovative ways, to make the best of their pre-service program, So I know that we had also said that this is going to be a conversation, like, because these are two minds in education, just having a conversation. So, and I know there are some questions you would want to, like, use to kick off and open the ground. So I'm ready to start with those questions and then begin to go deep dive to share my thoughts leadership on some certain things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harry. Um, if we are going to start with a question, we began a conversation on innovation and education, and one of the things, like I also reiterated the last time we saw, was how that you spoke to the fact that innovation is not really limited to scientists or engineers or those in tech per se, and how that even teachers in their space, in the ed space, can get to, project that level of innovation, even in the ed space, even in whatever, let's say, subsector it is in the education space, there is still that potential for them to, display a really, really, like you said, people would ask you and say, what department are you from? Are you from engineering? Are you from science? Are you from law? And all of those things, and only to realize that you're from education. So you you being, like, let's just say, like, it's like an example of an educator who is not really trying to limit, who is trying to go beyond what it is, and I want to say injecting those doses of innovation, or those uh let's just say doses of innovation. How do you think pre-service educators, or even educators generally, can actually get to innovate, or get to bring in that those insightful ideas they have about education? Because, like we said, innovation is from something they it's something new, and so these teachers get to see what has happened, and they're in the best position to innovate. There should be no external. Yeah, so I've got you.
So this is such a very beautiful, question to start with, and I think I remember, like, my earlier days, as a student studying science education, chemistry, focusing on chemistry and education, and I would engage in conversation or go to conferences or be a part of competitions, and people would say, "Oh, yeah, definitely probably a law student." Or I would get access to, some communities, and these are communities that people felt like, even though these communities didn't have barriers of entry, but because people were already used to seeing some kind of people in those spaces, so there was already a societal barrier. So there were some organizations that joined, maybe like ISEC, all of those kind of things. And it was like spaces where you would see maybe law students or engineering students, or majorly like, all of those people. So when you go there and you're like maybe the first education student that they have in that, and they're like, oh, really? Like you guys can also be here. And I'm like, yes, there was no, like we all have the same requirements. Like no student is greater than one other student. Like we all have the same matric number. We all have the same rights. There's no second class students. All of us are all first class students, in the school. Like we have the same rights. No student is higher than the other, right? So that understanding made me understand that it is a platform, and however you use your platform is what matters. If you relegate yourself without being relegated, then you would have nothing to show up for it, right? So the only reason people think that maybe other people from other faculty or profession are probably like, better is that one, there is always a conversation about esteem and confidence. So if someone is doing a program, they already know what that program can do for them, right? So it is because they know what that program can do for them and they know the possibilities that is in that program, then they are confident that they are in a good place. But I think most times people in education don't know what education can do for them. They don't understand the potentials of education. They don't know how good it can get. They don't know what it can, the possibilities that exist. So because they don't have the knowledge and the understanding of those things, then they cannot be confident because there is a fear of unknown. There is an uncertainty that comes with it, and they have not really had time or had the opportunity, to really explore those possibilities, which is why I'm very, grateful for the work that you are doing at Edify Summit. Beyond the conversations and beyond the things that you are doing, you're also bringing possibilities to pre-service teachers for them to see the opportunities and the things that exist, and on that platform, then they can now have confidence to be able to say, oh, like I attended a conference last week, and they exposed us to different opportunities that exist in this profession. Now I'm more confident to say I'm studying education. Now I'm more confident to say I'm training to be a teacher, because if you look at all of these other professions, they're always like conferences, they're always career fairs, they're always all of those things. And the idea and the reason behind many of these things is because they want to connect the students who are in school with people who have graduated in the same profession, or people who are charting certain courses in the same profession, so that they can come and inspire these people to say, I have done this, you can do it again. You can also make something. So it creates a lot of possibility. So that's why I also like championed innovation in education, or innovation generally, because if people become innovative, then they'll begin to explore other opportunities that exist in the sector. There is something I say that education is the only profession that I know, aside healthcare, that supports someone from the first day, from the first minute they land on this earth till the last. Because learning the moment a child is born, a child begins to learn. There's a way the child must, there are certain things that the parents must do for the child to begin to develop their brain. So there is always this training that parents even need to undergo to be able to begin to impart their children up until they now become toddlers, up until they take them to formal education, up until they finish formal education and they begin to acquire different non-formal education. So it's very interesting that aside healthcare, and that one is just even few contacts in people's lives. Someone might not have contact with an healthcare system even throughout their lives, because some people were not born in the hospital. But one thing I know is that there is no way you can come into this earth, there is no way you can be on this planet and you would not come in contact with education the moment you could begin to speak. Because even learning how to pronounce words, how to release sounds, how to say things the right way is education. Because some people have taken time to study that area, and they have created processes. So it's very interesting as to the people who have the greatest opportunity don't even understand that they're sitting down on a mine, right? Which means that you can just focus on just one aspect of the human life cycle, and say, I want to be able to innovate and master this life cycle of this particular space in lifetime of human beings, and I want to provide resources, tools, and I want to provide technology, innovations that can improve the life cycle of that, and that's the beautiful part of education, right? The fact that it is multifaceted, multidimensional, you can integrate it into any sector or however you want to integrate it. It's a call to innovation, and that's actually why we started talking about innovation, because people need to understand that innovation does not necessarily always mean to create something new. Sometimes it can just be to improve a particular thing. So what we wanted to take people into is that look at the society as a whole and look at the learning defect that the education, because every single thing that we have right now in this our society hinges on education, right? So there's a popular saying that people perish because they lack knowledge. So the reason we have a decay in our society is because people do not know. If people had known certain things, they wouldn't have taken certain actions. If people had certain knowledge, they wouldn't have, done certain things. Then the question is, who is providing that knowledge? The question is, who is creating sensitization around that knowledge? The question is, who is building innovative things to ensure that the knowledge gets to people, right? So if we think about innovation, I would imagine that there was a time that I was running with a campaign that an average classroom teacher should be a researcher, and that research should not just be limited to masters or PhD, because this is a teacher that has a population size consistent over time, and the students are behaving in different ways, and they can begin to document and begin to observe, okay, this child that is extremely exceptional in class, what is the reason behind that? Why is this child, constantly the best performing student over 3 terms, over 3 years, over 4 years? Is there something that we have seen about the best performing students in a particular region and in a particular area? How do they live their lives? What is their routine like? What kind of food do they eat? The families that they have and the relatives that they have? What's the level of education of their parents? All of those kind of things. When we have that information and when we begin to document that information, there are certain insights that we can bring out of that. And when we bring things out of that, then we can now have recommendations and templates that we can even administer to parents of that particular location to say, if you want your students or your children to be extremely exceptional, these are some of the things that we have been able to notice over the years, maybe over the last 5 years of teaching. This is what we have noticed as to the characters and as to the behaviors of high-performing students in this particular area. Then because of that, then you can take that findings and recommendation to maybe the local government development area, local council development area, or the local government, chairman, or the local territory of that place, and say, this is what we have noticed, and we want to get every child in this local area or in this area or in this community to that stage or to this level. So are there certain infrastructures that you have noticed that is necessary that you need to put in place? Are there certain family support that you need to do? So that's really the innovation that we are calling people into, to be able to observe what is not obvious, to be able to capture what is lost in I want to say capture what is lost in time, but I want to say but that doesn't really speak to it, but it's like capturing what people are not paying attention to, that we can either create or improve, that can improve the learning outcomes of children. Because let's not forget that that's the reason we are doing all of this. The reason we are doing all of this is to ensure that the African child is equipped with the knowledge and the tools and the resources and the capabilities that they need to be able to be able to thrive in the future, right? Because we know that the future is Africa, right? And we also understand from the statistics and from the things that we know that Africa is a very youthful population, right? So the average African child, which they say is 16, is in secondary school. So when you begin to think about it, and that age will continue to reduce and will continue to reduce and will continue to reduce as our population increases and as years goes by. So that means that the average population of Africa, the average African, most likely in the next 10 years, would be in GSS 3 or GSS 2. So now, when you think about it, that means that they spend more time in the classroom than at home. Because once they go to school by 7 or by 8, they don't leave until like 2 p.m. In some cases, some don't even leave until like 4. So imagine that they have spent about 8 hours or 9 hours of their life after spending about 6 to 7 hours sleeping. They spend a significant portion of their life in the classroom or in the school environment. So that means that more than ever before, or more than we might admit, teachers are more shapers of the minds of students than even parents would ever be, right? And if the society wants to create sound citizens, if the society wants to create a society of inventors, then teachers need to be inventors themselves, because you cannot give what you don't have. If you want to create a group of people who are going to be extremely intellectual at what they do, if you want to create a society where every person is a solution provider, or everybody is going to be innovative, then the people who they spend time with the most need to be innovative. So teachers need to get themselves to that point, or even pre-service teachers need to get themselves to that point of, oh, I'm not just there to teach a subject. I'm there to create a legacy, or to create a value of innovation. So that's why I keep talking about innovation, because innovation is not just only about tech. It's not just only about doing something technical. It's about improving society. It's about improving situation of things. And if we want to have a group of people who can create this change, then we need to get ourselves to a point where an average teacher is an inventor, not just inventor of not just inventor of technological products, but inventor of various things, even such as good habits, morals, such as uprightness. Like, you must be able to see something that is wrong, and you must be able to reinvent the wheel in certain things. That's what it means to be an inventor. An inventor is not necessarily somebody who is building mechanical things, because most times when we mention, I know that many of these words have been attached to a particular profession, but these are just words that that is for people who can reimagine. So a teacher is supposed to be the master at reimagining. Even a teacher is supposed to be a master, someone who can reinvent something, who can recreate something, who can create something, because it is until we get teachers to that point that we can now have a population, or that we can now have a society that will be great. Because let's not forget that they will say that no country can rise above its level of education, but I dare say that no country or no society can rise above the level of its teachers. So if teachers are the least innovative, if teachers are the least creative in the society, then we understand the level of quality of people that we're going to produce. So that's why this thing is burning in my heart. And the best time to begin to show people the possibilities that exist is why they are still in training. The best time to prepare for a war is when there is peace. So that's why I really appreciate the work that the Edify Summit and the Levoy, like the organization is doing, because it's really going to the root and say, let's raise an army of educators who would see education differently, and not consider education as a charity, but as a sector through which every other sector, the finance sector, women empower. Like, sometimes it will surprise us, right? Because there was a time when during my teaching practice, it was very interesting that I realized that I'll give us that story, because I think it's very important. So when I was doing my teaching practice at a government school, I'd already taught before. I used to teach before, but then when I got into the degree program, I needed to do the teaching practice. So I realized that there was, aside the fact that the students were laid back, there was a high level of sexual harassment and sexual assault in the school. Like, you would hear cases of just male students harassing and touching inappropriately the other female students, and vice versa sometimes. But it was more rampant with the men. So I took it upon myself to do a very good sensitization on the assembly and in the classrooms about sexual harassment, saying that I would personally send you to jail if you harass anybody again in the school. But basically, it was just me letting them know, like, the grave consequences that came with that.
Yeah.
And it was surprising that some of them began to share things like, oh, what's bad in touching someone's so I would, for the sake of this conversation, I know it's a censored thing, but like what's there in touching someone's like rare like back, and because they saw it as play, right? And there was a day like that a particular case came to me of a lady saying that there was a guy that kept coming to her, kept pushing her, kept doing all of that to the extent that he started like, almost wanting to like seduce her against the wall and all sorts of things. And I was very angry, and I brought him, and I was about to like, tell him, report him to like authorities and ensure that he got like maybe a suspension or all of those kind of things. But then when I asked him why, I just felt the need to ask him why he had done all of those kind of things. And even though there are no excuses for bad behavior, it made me understand that when I asked him, so why did you do this? Listen to what he told me. He said, at home, his uncles have told him that when you are making advances to a girl, a woman or a lady is very shy to tell you to give consent. So when they do not talk or when they are shy, is even more reasons why you should move closer to them and push them further and make advances towards them in those kind of ways, because they are never going to say yes to you. They are never going to give consent to certain things because they are reserved and introverted and shy. So you as a man have to be the one to, push yourself on them. And this is an education system that runs in the slums, right? That even when someone says no, what the society or what they are learning is that this is not no, this is yes. Right? So now imagine. So when I heard that, I knew that this boy did not even have the right information. He didn't even have the right knowledge. Right? So he's acting upon a software that has been installed inside of him. And that software is that even that a woman does not have a choice over her own body. So that is a knowledge system. And imagine this is that child or that boy at that time when I met him was already a teenager, would grow up to become someone who assaults women and who harasses women, and would revert that way when he has children or when he has friends and all of that. So then it made me realize that there is an education system that is happening even in the slums. The so-called Egbon Adugos, the people who have there's an education system that happens. There's a formal level of apprenticeship and mentoring and teaching of streets, that they call it, that happens in those kind of categories. So, and I say the reason I went into that story a bit is to show us like that in shaping the society, sometimes, there are so many softwares that have been downloaded and installed into people, which are not right. So that is what the guy knows. So it took me a lot of time to explain to him that, no, that's not it. People can have a choice. And people can say, no, things are not supposed to be that way. But I mean, this child came into this world without any knowledge. When children are born, they don't have anything. They acquire things from the society and from the environment. They begin to learn from how we do things and everything. But that is the message that is in his head. So I was saying that getting education right will help us solve a lot of problems. If this guy had the right education, that means if I am correct, and from what we have seen in some developed nations and some research that we have seen, is that if you want to reduce domestic violence in a particular society, you start from the classroom. If you want to reduce unemployment, you start from the classroom. If you want to reduce all form of violent crimes, you start from the places of learning. So teachers are not just there to allow people to pass WAEC or common entrance or get very high marks in exam. It's not just only the cognitive things that we assess. We all know that there is the cognitive, there is the affective, and there is the psychomotor. So, but many times we don't focus on those three things to ensure that we develop the well-rounded students. So many of the ills in the society are hinged on that. And then we need to begin to now think of how then can we improve. And that's why teachers need to be innovative. And that's why I keep championing this course. So we need to get to a point where an average teacher sees himself or sees herself as an innovator, someone who is reinventing society, someone who is constructive. But then also, how then can teachers now do that if they themselves don't give themselves to the process of renewal of their minds or building their capacity? That's why I'm happy with the kind of work that you are doing, training teachers, building the capacity of schools, providing tools for them to be able to, because if they don't, you cannot give what you don't have. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Right. So that's like the beginning, and summits like this and platforms like this, allows us to do that. But that's like some of the things I wanted to, speak to about right now in this moment. But it will be good for me to hear some of the other thoughts and some of the other questions that you have for me as we begin to explore
Yeah,
this and go very deep.
very, very insightful. I actually picked up a lot of things from what you said, and it's the idea of the day. We do not just, because knowledge can be anywhere, education can take place anywhere. And in as much as, the funny thing is that these things can be transgenerational, what they learn, they get to pass. So everyone is a student, everyone is a teacher. And they are right. Whatever, as long as you're able, you see what you said about the uncle's teaching, and then he, when he grows up, gets to pass the same knowledge. And if something has to be done about that, then yeah. But I'm going to ask in this direction because, in fact, I have maybe two questions, and then um, when we say, because you spoke from an area of, and I believe so much that like you rightly said, innovation for teachers is something that is, in this world that is ever dynamic, you cannot just have a standstill. And that is exactly what even pushes us to innovate, to have things that work with what we see around us, not just staying as an archaic or an obsolete individual or as even an educator. You can't even have, it's not even possible because things change. The same, like, as basic as it is, teaching something like social studies, with the kind of changes we have in government, you just have to know the new president and all of those things. So there's a need for teachers to get to know new things. And like you said, you can't, all of those need to know new things are just the basic of how you can be innovative, if I may say that. Now, you said that Africa is the future, right? And one thing I always believe in is that, we've got to receive a lot of things from the West. We've got many of these things. I'm not saying that we don't have our own, what we've, put forth all of those things, but then I believe that there is something that would have to take like the tables will have to turn, and whereby we do not just look to the West anymore, but the West begins to look to us in Africa, right? And it's just like you said, there needs, if educators, let's just put it in the education sphere now, in the education sphere, if we want to have, if if what is even come to mind is that the whole what we have as education actually came from the whites and all of those things. But then when you talk about the history of education and how they came even into Nigeria, how they work with the Ghanaians and all of those things. But then that does not really that does not really determine, or that is not like a, should I say, a benchmark from where we source all of these things. There's still a potential for we as Africans to still say this is what we've seen work. And if you can, if it works here in Africa, we may not understand. You may not want to put context. You may want to put context and all of these locations, geographical locations, all of those factors into consideration. But then there's a way we can also get to posit our ideas that the world will get to say, yes, these are true facts. These are facts. These are applicable. These are right. And there's a point where we, as educators in Africa, because I watch a lot of YouTube things on YouTube on EdTech Africa, things that what are these guys' name again? CBS, is it CBS or CNBC? Getting to do, and how we have some creative minds in the area of EdTech push for things. So what do you think? So I don't get to say a lot. What do you think? How do you think we as as educators or whatever in any sphere, pre-service, in service, whatever level it is. What do you think? I think you've mentioned one already where we get to renew our mind. But do you think there's a possibility that, the tables turn right? I think I think I'll rephrase that question, where the tables turn, and then we get to see ourselves as, you know, get to see ourselves as givers of knowledge, that okay, this is what we've seen. We are no more, not that we are no more getting, but we are having, either we are providing insights to even the West or to whatever it is, and there's a form of collaboration. So there's no really like we are just taking it all in, and we have no say, or we have no position. I still believe that we've said certain things. We've seen things work in our own context in Nigeria or in Africa in general that they agree with. But I don't think, maybe I might be wrong, that it's really projected like there's no gradient. It's not like an inclined thing. So is there a way we can balance it, or is there a way we can up the gradient where we are serving or we are giving off all of those things? Yeah, that's just my thought.
Yes, that's such a very insightful question. There's a popular saying that a house divided against itself cannot stand. So that's the first place we even need to start with. So if we as African educators and, want to become leading voices, of education transformation, as people will call
Yeah,
it.
that's the word, leading voices.
Yes, leading voices. Then the first thing is that I like the word leading voices. The first thing is that we need to have a voice. So leading voices, like everybody's speaking. Some people are not even speaking at all. But then we need to have a voice. So when look at it, I think of it as an orchestra, right? I like music a lot, right? And in one of our projects, we are working on a teacher's choir. So there's a lot of music information I've consumed lately, right? Just to ensure that it works out. And but then if you check an orchestra, everyone is singing, but they have one voice. You hear just one sound. People playing different instruments, people humming different tones at different pitch level and all of that. But like if they're just saying, "Ooh," it is. But if you put your ears closely to what the person beside you is saying, and the person that is the 100th person is saying in the full, they are saying different things, but it is one voice. So if you want to become, if African educators or African education, wants to become a leading voice in transforming the entire world, and that will become a global case study and a one-stop shop place to learn about things that can transform societies, then we need to have a leading voice. And how then do you have a leading voice? I've realized I took my time. Sorry, like I said, I've been learning a lot. So I'd watched a particular case study and about orchestras. I just want to get how they were being built. But like, the first thing is that there's always a goal. There's always a goal, and everybody brings their uniqueness to achieving that goal. So now African Union has tried their best to come up with the African Manifesto. They've declared African value, goal objectives for education and all of that. But beyond that, we need to begin to now define what that feels like. What's the meaning of these goals as Africans and as educators in Africa? So sometimes when we mention Africa, people find it very difficult to imagine what that means. So let's just say Nigeria. Let's start from Nigeria. Or West Africa, there's ECOWAS, at least, Let's just begin to even see all of those kind of things as to what does a transformative education look like? And how can we get there in 50 years? How can we become the hub for education in 20 years? Like, let's have those kind of, and then we have values. So when we now have values and things that we want to embody, then we can now ask ourselves, what are the capacities we need to build to be able to get to that point? So when an orchestra sings, they were not like that the first day, but they had a target of, this is how we want to sound. This is what we want to sound like. This is how we want to appear. So they continue to do rehearsals. They continue to do training. They continue to start. There are some people that they will need more extra voice training. There are some people that will need endurance. There are some people that will need different forms of assessment. They will first assess them and ensure that everybody gets what they want. Then some people, they need the trumpet, they need the trombophone, they need all of those kind of things. Then they begin to give them that tool and resources and infrastructure. So one, we need to assess ourselves and see, we need to set our goals and say, this is where we are going. This is the voice that we want to have. We want to be a leading voice in education transformation. And what does that education transformation look like in the African context? Let's not compare it to the Western standard. Like, what does this look like? What is indigenous to us? What is the African's education? Because I know I've always argued that, yes, we have an African education system, but we don't have a formalized global African education system. But people say, oh, this is the Finnish education system. This is the Western education system. Then what is the African education system as known by Africans? But then what we see many times is adaptations of the West, British curriculum, American curriculum. In fact, it's very interesting that even many people have built businesses, and I do not blame them, but many people have built businesses and have pride in teaching American and British curriculums in Africa. Right, which is a very different conversation. If you want to have that, that's a very big, different ball game at the end of the day. But like, these are ways and tools of colonization again, because the greatest form of colonization is not slavery; it is the colonization of the mind. And if we want to get to a place of decolonizing our systems, this is a way we can do that, right? To ensure that we even discover and come up with what our values are, what our objectives are, then we do a thorough assessment of where we are and how much capacity and strength we need to build to amass that. Then we now begin to build our capacity. So like organizations like your own begin to come and begin to administer trainings, begin to build infrastructure, begin to do certain things that can begin to help the teachers to get there. So by the time we already have a vision, we already have the values we want to build, you have already identified the capacity. In no time, it's like the example of the orchestra that I've given, they're already doing rehearsals. The person who needs extra voice training is already getting extra voice training. The person who requires an instrument is already learning how to play the instrument. Everybody's already developing themselves in one way or the other. And they are doing rehearsals. So there are times when they come together. So like the summit that you have is a time where everybody that has been building capacity can come together. We can be having more town halls and we come together and we rehearse, right? We can be having moments like maybe competitions or symposiums or colloquiums, all of those kind of things. We rehearse again and say, okay, how coherent and how great do we sound together? We come again the next year, we sound again, we come again in another place, we rehearse, we bring our voices together. Then it's going to get to a point where we know that, Christine, perfect, Claire, we are in sync. Then that is when you now call for, it is only when the orchestra and rehearsals are in sync, that's when they start selling tickets. Because let's not forget that it is that in sync video or performance that they will use to sell the ticket that, we are now in sync. See, let's just perform one song for you. Buy these tickets and then we'll
Come
perform
and hear us.
Yeah, come and hear us perform 10 different things. So that's the thing. So, but before you get there, you need to do a lot of rehearsals. You need to identify your strength, your skills. Some people don't have stamina to sing for long. They have to do endurance training. They have to do all sorts of things. They have to come to this convenience to see whether they are one voice. They have to come to a convenience to see whether they are one voice. So until we get to that point where we now have one voice, then we'll now invite the entire world. So I would imagine something like One Young World or World International Summit in Education. All of these great summits, maybe happens in Africa, or we even create African Education Summit or African Innovation. Like, we can just do something and invite the entire world to see, just like Egypt does. What's the name again? So there's a World Youth Forum, right? So basically, some countries and some nations, Qatar has Qatar 2024, Dubai has Dubai Expo, just different countries and different nations and different continents have their various ways to show people that we have a voice, right? So by the time we do that and we invite the whole world, then it is going to be said that Africa has become the leading voice in education, because now the kind of experience that we do, we get one thing, transformation. Wow. transformation. They will hear indigenous, local, contextual transformation, innovation in different ways and in different sizes, right? So I feel like that's like a clear, when we think about it as the orchestral approach, you know, and we have a performance, which is supposed to inspire the whole world, right? Then I think that it's just as simple as that. Nature shows us a lot of things that we can always learn from. So that's actually how I'm going to answer this and address this.
Thank you so much. I so much believe in that as well, because someone we both know, or let me put it this way, even we got to hear that from a lot of people, now, that there is a need for one accord. There is the need for that one accordance for things to actually work. So if we are divergent, then that means is the flow. We can't understand where the flow is if you're really divergent, and that's really insightful. I believe that, and one thing I think I picked up from that is that it just came to mind. I said there's in as much as there is the orchestra, right? There is someone leading the orchestra, and so there is, he might not even really be the person singing, but there is a direction to it. There is he's the one giving the whole direction to it. So that means there needs to be someone that brings these people together, right? And I might not know too much of music. I don't know if it's the same director that does the whole music and all of those training. But then we see him, we see that orchestra master or that director is the one, putting it into play. I got an insight from that. Thank you so much. I think the last question we'll just have is you posted something, and even before I commented, I said there is so much, I think one of the things that really gets to the deter people, even those in the education sphere themselves, not to even speak of those that are coming in, or maybe the pre-service educators, is their constant, it's not wrong, the perception or their constant I don't want to use the word that sounds okay, their view of how the thing is, the reward system we have in education. I want to thing, one thing I've understood is that even if people, when we say teachers or educators generally are the like what like sorry, what UI said they are the educators are the something of society, they are the makers of society or something, they're the builders of nation, yes, nation builders. They said educators are nation builders, right? However, these nation builders are the most underpaid in that nation, or they are not the most rewarded, or they're not the most recognized. And my understanding of things, especially from the scripture, is that there is always this the head shall the last shall be the head, or he that must lead must be a servant, or him that must be the master must be a servant. Or I think I even like the part where there's always this kind of paradox. And so how would you address this, or what would you say when it comes to teachers, taking a look at the reward? I'm not saying it's wrong to have that reward. I'm not saying that you should not get paid for that. But do you think there needs to be a re-engineering of the mind, maybe as to not just looking at and like I said before, bills have to be paid, people have to do things, but then what do you think? What would you say to the fact that teachers keep complaining about the fact they're underpaid and all of those things, and they seem that is a good reason for them to leave the education sector and go somewhere else, or that they shouldn't even venture into it at all? Or let me not even say venture into it, go into, because venture is like a business thing. They should not even going into it at all, even if they have that passion. How would you address that? Although there's a way I would pitch, if you don't get to, if I have a thought around that, and I might get to put that in as well when you're done,
Yeah.
around when you're done
Yes.
speaking start.
Yeah. I think that's always a very, so there's something I always say about, most times we are very quick to get rewards and we forget about the inheritance. So I will give law, for example. So for a long time, I studied like the law profession, and I mean, there was a time when lawyers didn't make money, right? People will feel like, why am I supposed to pay you because you argued, or because you are talking, or because you helped me with the contract? But then what I realized was that lawyers started negotiating for inheritance. So a lawyer would say, okay, I would help you settle this family dispute, And if I get it right in settling this family dispute, you give me a plot of land, or you give me 10% of it. So like they were not focused on most of the wealth that many lawyers had, I don't know how it works now, but from time immemorial, most of the wealth that lawyers had, most of the wealth that surveyors had, all of those people who were into like properties or it was more like, oh, I will help you to like guard this land, just give me one portion of it. And they were doing it for multiple people. So it was more like they focused more on the inheritance, on the futuristic things that could happen rather than the short-term benefits. And as long as what they needed at that point was survival, and they were buying the deep for the future. And that's where we need to get to as teachers or as educators. We need to begin to look at the system as what are the short-term benefits and what are the long-term benefits. And let's not want to get everything right now. So there's a lot of progress that we are seeing in intellectual property, but teachers forget that they produce a lot of intellectual property content. So can we begin to lay patents, and can we begin to have intellectual properties that are designed? Can you, as a teacher, can you begin to design frameworks and models that you have seen from your student that you can keep in time, that that definitely this thing would have more reward in the future? So it's not just about, can we begin to write books and things like that, that it's not necessarily about now. So because it's not compulsory that this book is super expensive, you don't have to break even in the first 5 years, right? But the goal is that you are creating something that is eternal, like that has a value that can always build itself. Also, can we have negotiations, right? That maybe begin to, I also feel like, especially for private schools, right? If they want to thrive, I don't see why many of them are not offering some long-standing teachers or some powerful teachers. Like, why is it that some teaching roles are not coming with equities or shares? Because this business, I know that schools, they are registered differently, but it's a business for some of the school owners, right? And why are they not coming with those kind of things? Why are we not embracing more co-ownership rather than just employment? So a teacher can be a partner in a school, but they are the head of department for maybe mathematics department. So they don't necessarily need to be the principal or to be on the management. It is that this person, there is a wealth of experience that it brings in terms of this, and this is what we see it every time in law firms. We see it every time in other companies, in management consulting, in many of these other companies, and they bring in someone who has a particular job because of the value that this person has captured. For example, maybe someone has 20 years of experience, transforming a school, and you know that there's a school that you have in a community, and bringing this person on board is going to really mean a lot of sense, but you do not have the money to pay them or something like that, but you could offer them that. So I'm inviting you into the school ownership. Like, if you come and like you have 10% of this, maybe for 10 years or something like that. So the person knows that, okay, aside beyond the money, I like, if truly I am a transformative person, if truly I can bring change, since I'm a owner, I'm part of when I have a small piece of this, I can transform this, right? So I think there is also that, and there is teachers thinking far beyond this. I've argued a lot of times that we need to start reimagining what teachers' cooperative societies look like. Aside, I used to be in one. I started contributing money every month so that we can buy cooler and we can buy all of those things. And can we do cooperative societies? And the goal of the cooperative society is not
We
just
used to
buying
buy
land.
shares.
Exactly. Can we use it to even build schools? Right? Can we use it to start publishing companies that are publishing the books that, like, so when we begin to think about it as there's an entire ecosystem around education, because I've seen professors who are extremely wealthy and they don't leave the classroom because maybe in the process of teaching or performing a lot of experiments, they came up with something innovative, they went to patent it, and now it has been commercialized. So they don't need to leave the classroom. Teachers think that for them to make it, they need to, like, you see a lecturer riding like the latest Ferrari, and you're like, this person is always the first to get to class, and you just hear that, oh, at some point they discovered something in the lab, or they discovered something, and many companies are using it now. It's being used in this thing, it's being used in that thing. So they don't even have to be there. And there was no way they would have discovered it if they were not in the classroom. So it doesn't make sense to now live where you don't leave your source. Do you understand? So they know that they can see all this development. So teachers also need to see it that way. What's inside the children that you have been able to help with maybe dyslexia, all of these learning disabilities, are there product and things that you are creating out of it that can have eternal value, that can be patented, that can be given, that can give the copyrights to certain schools, to certain publishers? Can our cooperatives begin to reimagine how we are being stationed? Can we have more teachers cooperative society owning publishing companies, owning paper mills, owning printing press, owning certain softwares, becoming largest shareholder in some ed tech companies, right? So we need to get our minds toward away from salary to like this sector. How can we rule over this sector? Because external people and outsiders are the one bringing their money into education. So the people who are in education are not even putting their little widow's mite into it or even taking charge of the opportunities that exist. So, for example, why are we not, so just so many things. Why are teachers not creating technology and innovation hubs where students can always go to access technology and information and trainings, right? So why are we not putting our money? And it's just very interesting because that's how you solidify and build an ecosystem. So, but then there is no way you would think of that if your first reaction is how much are they paying me as salary? Because once it's just very simple. Once people meet their basic needs, sometimes they don't think again.
You don't think beyond basic needs.
They don't think beyond. So we need to get teachers to think, and that's why we need them to be more innovative. So if they are more innovative, they will think beyond basic needs. In fact, someone will even go and meet their school principal and say, hello, sir, I have an idea that can revolutionize the school. But if I implement this idea, and I know that this idea will also be profitable and will help the economy. I mean, we can get as creative and as beautiful as telling the government and say, going to the federal government or going to the state government and say, give us 5 years or give us 3 years, we'll change the education landscape and it will, in fact, in turn, improve the economic GDP of this country. But on one condition, once we do that, every teacher will have a special card that will not make them pay for public transportation again. Because, so there are negotiations that we can make, or okay, if we do this, if we improve the GDP by the work that we do in the classroom by 10% or by 5% or by 2% or by whatever percentage, we'll get certain tax incentive and certain tax breaks. It is negotiation that causes that. It is understanding the values. So we need to get ourselves to the point where we see the work that we do and how it creates economic value. What I mean by economic value, so for example, if the country spends maybe $10 billion on policing, and we know that the root cause of many of these crimes is from the classroom, and we can solve it, and we can reduce the money that the government spends on policing from 10 billion to 4 billion. That means that we have saved the government 6 billion. That 6 billion can be used to increase the salaries of teachers, can be used to start housing plans for teachers, can be used to put teachers on insurance, can be like, so it is how do you see value? So we need to even get teachers to be innovative in the first place, for them to be able to think about certain things in some ways. I know that this is like reimagination, and I've done a lot of those exercises. That's why it's easy for me to say. But that's the kind of conversations I have in rooms that, okay, can we get our teachers to the point where they become valuable enough to be able to make certain negotiations with government of nations, right? And that is when we stop looking at the short-term plans and begin to optimize for the long-term goals. So that's like basically what my thoughts are. But I would like to hear some of your thoughts that you would like to chip in also regarding how we should be thinking about this whole reward system, for
Yeah.
teachers.
Yeah, you've taken the words out of my mouth, actually. The fact that was the first thing you said, having that understanding between inheritance and just normal rewards or incentives, all of those things. Because let me even say, I've seen owners of school who sharing their story with me. They've told me of things they've done, like not even considering the amount things they've done, but even going out of their it's a thing of the mind. These are people that they already know the whole essence of what it is, making sacrifices, even going ahead as buying uniforms for children, paying school fees for children, and it's not something they are doing for any give backs or receipts or anything, but they do these things, and there is always that futuristic reward they get to have, not just for the now, things that their children would get to enjoy. Because you also mentioned that there are things that is not even for now, the next generation get to benefit. They'll, when you hear stories of how the child of a teacher was helped to get admission because the person who was in admissions asked, "Is your father this or is your mother this?" And he said, "Ah, this is what your dad did to me." All of those kind of stories. You see, they are not cooked up stories. These are things that run, and even beyond, a direct contact with those that were helped. These are things that people may not even know actually work out. That there's always this, you know, there's always this what you sow is what you reap kind of thing happening back to them. And because of these little things, they do not minding the fact that I'm earning this, I'm earning that. It's all, there's always something beyond just the short term of it. And then if teachers are able to, the second part I'm going to talk about is if teachers are able to look at themselves, like look inward and then look outward and say, okay, these are the things we're experiencing. These are the areas that are having challenge. Like I already spoke with you, I said, only teachers can know how to solve the problem they're encountering. I've seen people come in with their own LMS, EdTech solution, all of these things, but it's still not addressing. It addresses it at a level, but you cannot. I still said that okay, let me just finish that. I said there are dynamic problems that that means we have to be explaining all of our problems to you, which may not be very comprehensive. We have to explain everything to you, but if we know the problem we are facing, or we know the challenges that are there, and we're able to solve our problems for what it is, then I believe that we can always get to have that value, the value that we project in that area, not solving it personally, but for other teachers or other educators that see themselves in that same kind of category, right? And that brings that form of impact, that form of value, because we know that this is someone, and that comes from an innovative mind, because people just look out for others that will solve the problem for them and giving up, because reward or value will always go to where solution is. And so people tend to, outsource that kind of thing, forgetting the fact that there is always a value attached to that problem solving and all of those things. I was also going to mention one. Yeah, I was saying it earlier. I said teaching, I said, if we are to say, okay, if we are to even say, because I was talking about the fact that, okay, AI cannot replace teachers and educators. I said, if AI, let's just assume that AI was actually to replace teachers, that means that we have to keep feeding that AI with every data, because the kind of, human beings, for who they are, or for what we are rather, I'm saying as if I'm an alien. Human beings, for what we are, we have the ability to understand and to understudy, see the different changes and dynamics. For example, having been a teacher, you know exactly from previous encounters and experiences, you know that these are the tendencies of a child. These are the likely things a child can do. But do you have that data? You can't have a robot be a class teacher, because it's not. It's how do you want to study the sarcasm? How do you want to study the gimmicks? How do you want to understand the whole behavioral patterns that they explore, that they exude, or that they display? Not possible, except that data has been fed into that particular AI module. And I said it's not even possible. Do you know how much it costs to put in data, or to run data through, or to feed an AI module with data? That means you have to be doing it on a daily basis, because every new thing happens with every new class and every new day. Every subject has a different response. Every encounter has something different, right? So it's a whole thing entirely, because there is still that point. There's still that point where we teachers are the owner. We take ownership for what we do. We take ownership for who we are, or for all of what we do. And so I believe, coming back to that same question, or to address that same question in a different light, is that we just need to steer our ships ourselves, right? And have that understanding that in as much as we want to get this money, or want to do certain things, or want to live that life, and honestly, there are teachers that are actually exemplifying such things, right? You don't, there's no, it's from a mindset. The way it was, apologies. The way it was at that time was, you can't even, teachers don't have cars. You can't even say you want to marry someone that's a quality teacher. But the way it is now, with the kind of things that have been made available in different level, we can always diverge. We can always say we are doing this aside what we are doing. After your, let's say 8 to 4 or 8 to 3, hours, you can move ahead to do something different. Or if you decide, okay, moving away from the classroom, if you decide to do that, which I might not really be going into that direction, but then there's something that you do or you provide that addresses the whole need or the whole problem or the whole addresses the elephant in the room, that okay, this is exactly what we are trying to do. So for me, that desire to, I'm not saying is a wrong desire, but that desire to look at or to complain about the whole situation of this incentive or the payment or the salaries should not be should not be, I think the word is overskilled beyond the impact we make or beyond the rewards. We don't lose sight of the real reward compared to that which you just spend every day and then gets to lose value. And I also I agree with what you said also about the fact that teachers need to see, yeah, yeah. I believe that teachers can see, they can get to, they can get to look beyond what it is and put more focus into having sustainable solutions, building with what they've had, the kind of the innovative mind they're building for themselves, have something that can work and that can even precede them. Is it precede or succeed? Yeah, succeed them, even in a transgenerational level. All right, so thank you so much, Eri, for having spent I think overall close on hour with us. It was really an insightful session. I am sure that anyone that has come in contact or that will come in contact with this now or in the future would have something to hold on to. All of the ideas you shared, all of the insights you gave are really, really amazing, are really, really great. And I'm sure that, you know, if I get to have a real watch of this, it's something that I know would always cause a stir or cause us to have something, to not just discussing it, but also implementing it. Thank you so much again.
Thank you
I
so
don't know if you have any final words or we can round off here.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for having me. I am just really glad to be, sharing these things with, with the people who care about education. And I'm just really appreciative of what you have been doing with the Edify Summit. I know this is going to catalyze a lot of change, in the lives of pre-service teachers and even educators themselves, So I look forward to having more of these conversations and seeing the catalyzing effect of these conversations that we're having in the education sector and in the landscape of education globally. So yeah, so that's it. Thank you so much for inviting me. I do not take you for granted. There's a saying that I have, if they invite you somewhere once, they are taking a chance on you. If they invite you again, it's either of two things. It's either they wanted to correct the mistake you have made earlier, or they really truly love you. But I feel very loved with this second invitation to like go deep dive into some of the things that I've shared, and I'm very sure and I hope that it was worth everyone's time. So thank you so much. And for everyone who is watching this, if you have gotten here, you're almost at the end, right? So do well to follow this social media account and maybe subscribe if this is on YouTube. Just do well to keep yourself up to date on the recent happenings and trends, and also whatever program or capacity building opportunities that have been offered by this platform, please plug yourself into it. It's very, very important. Like we said, just like the orchestra, you need to build your tools. You need to be assessed. So if you're a school owner and you're watching this, invite them to come and assess the teachers that you have, your workforce. Let them know how much of innovation that your teachers have and how they can get them to be more innovative so that you can see that in the students. As a school owner, if you have more innovative students, these innovative students will even provide solution for their parents, and it would lead to wealth creation for their parents, and it will also in a way lead to them being able to pay for your services. So there's a ripple effect that trickles down, but then you cannot spot that on your own if you don't have professionals. So that's why people like Mr. Victor and the entire team working with him are very instrumental to this work. So when in doubt, call them. So they will be able to help you with, whatever it is that you are trying to navigate as a school or as a teacher or as an educator yourself. So thank you so much for inviting me once again. I deeply appreciate it.
You're welcome. We're really happy to have you here today. Thank you so much. So we've come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate the insight as well. It's not something we can, pay for or uh, estimate in what it is. Thank you so much. But we really appreciate. So we're going to round it off here. I think in the next one, if we are going to have a next one, I believe we are going to have a next one. In the next maybe episode of series, I'm sure that we're going to have an insightful moment as well. So please, like he has said, plug in with us and ensure you get to learn from this. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.